Kia ora, I'm Whiti Hereaka and I'm here to answer some of these questions that you sent through. Who or what inspired you to write? I guess there's not one person or one thing that inspired me to write. It wasn't like one event that made me want to write. It's a series of events and it's continuing. So every day there are people or things that inspire me to write. So yeah, finding out about the world inspires me to write. When I first started to write, I was very small, so I can't even remember what it was the first time I wanted to tell a story and why I wanted to tell a story. But that's always been a thing in my life, that I enjoy telling stories. So yeah, it's been an ongoing thing. Why do you choose to write? Yeah, again, I'm not entirely sure if I actually choose to write. The reason why I write is because I want to find out about the world, and it helps me process what the world is like. It helps me figure out the crazy things that are happening in the world. So I don't really choose to write. It's something that I feel like I need to do. So that's why I've continued to write throughout my lifetime, really. I'm trying to figure out my place in the world and what it means to be human. Why is a particular story important to you? Are there any connections to your whānau that you can share with us? This one's a really hard question to answer because all stories are important to me, especially when I'm in the midst of writing them. So, like I said before, I'm trying to figure out my place in the world and what it means to be a human in this world. So each story that I write is important to me to find out that reason. And I'm not entirely sure if any of my stories have a strong whānau connection. Probably the strongest connection is that we are a family of storytellers. My dad used to tell all sorts of shaggy dog stories when I was growing up. I have cousins who are visual artists, so we're all trying to find a way to tell stories to people. So I think that's the strongest connection I have to writing. But yeah, stories are important to me while I'm writing them. At the moment, I'm writing a retelling of Kurungaituku, and that story is important to me because I think it's important to tell the story of the villain from her point of view. A lot of stories we miss up the women's voice, and I want to bring that back to the story. It's not stories are more complicated creatures than just one person's point of view. So that's why that story is important to me at the moment. Were there any wero challenges for you while writing, and how do you overcome those? Every time you write something, it's a challenge. In fact, I don't really start a new project unless it's a challenge for me. So I'm always looking for something that will push me as a writer, whether that be trying a new form or a new genre. I like to try lots of different things. So I don't feel like I'm doing a good job as a writer unless I'm feeling challenged by the writing I'm doing. How I overcome that is that I think I'm a little bit bloody-minded. I'm a stubborn person, so I like to figure out puzzles and things as well in my spare time. So part of what makes me excited as a writer are the challenges of a new project. But there are other things as well, like being tired or having too much work on. And some of those things are really practical, like making sure I go to sleep early, making sure I've scheduled my time so I can have some time to write and time to rest. So sometimes the challenges are practical things, and you can take practical steps to overcome those challenges. One of the challenges I faced in the novel I'm writing at the moment, so that's Kurungaituku, was that I didn't think I was a good enough writer to write the novel I wanted to write. So I went and wrote another novel. put this novel aside for a few years, wrote another novel so I could get some more skills, so I could learn what I needed to learn to be able to tell the story how I wanted to tell it. So sometimes it's going back and learning new skills so you can face the challenges a bit more confidently. When did I first begin to write? I think I began to write before I could actually write. So I've been always telling stories since I was a wee girl. So storytelling has always been a really important part of my life. I started off in theatre. So when I was first, I guess, storytelling, I was making theatre, both in school and later on in university. And I started off writing as a playwright. So I've always come to writing from a kind of acting background, a physical sort of background. I started writing fiction also in school, because you always write short stories and things in school, but started seriously writing fiction like novels probably only about 10 or so years ago. So I started writing my first novel, and that was the first time I'd seriously thought about writing fiction. So I learned on the job, as it were. So yeah, I've been always writing since I was very little. I think I've always been one to tell a few tall tales. So it's always been something that's been in my life. How did you feel when you published your first book and your most recent? I think I felt the same publishing my first book as my most recent, and that feeling is a little bit of disbelief that it's actually been published and it's out there in the world, and feeling proud of doing it as well. The biggest change is that when I published my first book, I couldn't say that I published it without cracking up, because it was totally unbelievable that I had done it. So I would say, I've published a book, and start cracking up, which is not really professional. So don't do that. So the biggest change from then and now is that I feel more proud than I feel disbelief. It's still amazing to me and crazy that my words have been published and other people read them. It's a great privilege to be in that position. But yeah, that's kind of what I felt like from my first book to my last book. A little bit of disbelief, but mostly proud. What is your favourite series of books? This one's a really hard one, because I don't really read series of books. I was thinking back to when I was a kid. I did read Anne of Green Gables and all of the books that went with that, and I read the Narnia Chronicles. But really, series of books weren't my favourite things to read. I like going into different worlds and meeting new people in the books. So I would probably read authors rather than series. So when I was a kid, I read a lot of Roald Dahl. I really liked his humour, and that his characters would get themselves into trouble, and it's a little bit creepy sometimes. And I really loved that about his work. And I followed his work as I got older and read his works for adults as well. Lately, I guess the only series that I do read would be graphic novels. So Sandman by Neil Gaiman, or Fables by, what's his name? I forget, but Fables. But yeah, I don't really read a lot of series. I like to experience new things and new books. How do you come up with ideas? So I've never really had a problem coming up with ideas. My problem has always been, how do I focus on the idea that I have? My mind tends to go all over the place, and I get a lot of ideas all of the time that I just need to focus on one or two to make the story. So I think part of that is because I've always been curious, and the reason why I write is to find out about the world and to figure out the world. So I always have like, what if this happened, or what if that happened in my brain. I think getting a lot of ideas, it helps if you're reading a lot. So I like to read, obviously, a lot of books, but also newspapers. And when I say read, I also count watching movies, going to the theatre, going and looking at art. I think all of those things count as reading for me. And I always read whatever I'm looking at with a mind to how the story is working and how I might write that story instead. So my second novel, Bugs, is partly an answer to Catcher in the Rye. I read that book when I was in high school and I didn't like it very much, and I wanted to write my own version of it. So that's partly where I got that idea. It's also a few other ideas put in there because, like I said, I can't limit myself to one idea. So yeah, going out and reading things, and I mean widely, so looking at art, going to the theatre, getting lots of experiences, and then asking what if, or why does that happen? What if this happened instead? That's a way to get some ideas into your life and your writing. And I think that's all of the questions, which I think I've answered really quickly.